Me too. So before we get into your work, I want to know this. 5 years ago, this pandemic was changing our lives, changing so many things. How did you get through that pandemic era, and how did it change the way that you do work and operate today?
Yeah. Well, firstly, at that time, I was running an e-commerce business, and somehow it was a business that was struggling before. It was a business that acquired. It was actually distressed, and the pandemic changed everything around in a positive way for us. So it actually, business-wise, was great, but it brought a lot of other cultural sensitivities. But it was a values-based business, and I think especially like when BLM started happening, then ended up having major impact on a lot of values-based businesses and how you think about things and what type of way you connect with a lot of your customers. And so I think people became so aware of their viewpoints, of what's important to them, and they started supporting more values based businesses, or they wanted you to, as a business, start doing more for the community and for people. And so it changed a lot of how we ran our business and what kind of things we ended up supporting. So it was kind of fascinating journey.
So let's get into exactly what you do as a business leader and an entrepreneur here in 2025. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of kids at career day. You're in a school, they're 12 years old, and one of the kids wants to know what you do for a living. What's your answer?
I help other businesses grow.
So what did you want to be when you were a kid? When you were 12 years old, what was your dream life?
Actually, my dream life when I was a kid was I had no interest in. Actually, I was a newspaper delivery boy at that time when I was 12 years old. And I had just, from my newspaper delivery for the prior year or two, I had saved up all my money and I wanted to donate it somewhere. I didn't never cared for spending money, but I cared to try and see how to make money so I could do something valuable with it. And maybe there's a bit of a longer story, but I don't know if I should tell it on.
No,
Uh,
that's good.
okay.
Yeah.
I actually went to India. I'm natively from India. So I went to India one time. I wanted to see where I could donate that money. I asked one of my uncles. He said, "I don't know where you can donate it, but I know somebody who might be able to guide you." So he took me to this temple. In the back of the temple, there was a room, and we went inside the room, and there was this like 90 plus year old guy in there, and he was very thin and frail, but his eyes had like a sparkle in it, something very like he glowed. And I asked him, "I have some money. I wanted to donate it somewhere. Can you guide me?" And he said, "If you knew that I was going to throw that money down a well, would you still give it to me?" And my instant reaction was yes, because I don't have an attachment to money. And he said, "That's the right answer." And after that, he started guiding me in many different spiritual pursuits and how to think about this world. And it was kind of fascinating. That actually started my whole journey of spirituality and business are hand in hand for me. So yeah, it's been a fascinating journey ever since then on how to bring like the mindset of stability, inner stability, and non-reactiveness, and faith in that there is a universal guiding hand that's there through the craziest situations that I've been through in life. So all of this is really about the journey and the joy that you get if you're able to be really present through that journey versus what eventually you want to seek. So I think I went from having a lot of goals when I was a kid to now trying to have zero goals and instead allow life to flow and really enjoy the journey and including the downs. Enjoy the downs as well, not just the ups. And life is going to have for sure a lot of ups and a lot of downs. And eventually you'll even realize a few years afterwards why those downs even had to happen in your life to help you with your own evolution and growth. So, yeah.
That's a great story. So, what were some of the other elements of your childhood with your family and growing up that gave you this business acumen, that gave you this desire to be an entrepreneur and to have such a benevolence with money and spirituality?
Yeah, firstly, all my family, my parents and my sister, my other sibling, they're all doctors, PhDs and doctors, and so they've been through all kinds of schooling, and they told me don't do what we did, get as little schooling as possible, and instead, as fast as possible, try and get into the world and start doing some good as fast as you can. And so I have the least education. I mean, I have a bachelor's degree, but that was pretty much it. After that, I really tried to see what can I contribute to this world, and can I do it in some meaningful way. So that, and then my upbringing was we lived in like for 3 years in different countries. Every 3 years we moved, and so I was first born in India when I was 3 or 4 years old. We moved to Ireland, and then we moved to Scotland, and then England, and then eventually America. And so I never had any long-term friends. I was always quite shy. I was a very much. I've always been an introvert, and it was hard for me to have a lot of friends. And so maybe originally my intent of trying to be successful in the worldly sense was maybe to give myself some kind of inner feeling of importance or something.
Yeah.
And eventually that evolved into realizing, well, really, it doesn't matter what happens so much in the world. And I've had very crazy highs. And very early, like when I was 25 years old, I made my first, became a millionaire. And so, for becoming wealthy when you're early, but then also later on in life being close to bankruptcy and, like having gone through all the different ups and downs of life, um, you eventually realize that actually this whole journey, whether it's through entrepreneurship or otherwise, is really so you can evolve as a human and become a better, more refined human that is less centered on yourself and bringing benefit to yourself, but more about what you can contribute to this world, and not be affected by what happens on the outside, whether tough or whether good or bad, but instead be more reliant on an inner stability that exists there all the time permanently.
So going to different regions of the world and seeing how different populations and people live their lives, did that increase your empathy and your desire to give back and to be more spiritually connected?
Yeah, firstly, you realize that doesn't matter how different cultures are. Fundamentally, people are good
Yeah.
anywhere you are. And even if they're in crazy situations, people are fundamentally good. And they might put on different personas or characteristics, or they might be from different environments or cultures, but actually, humans are humans. Like, humans are by nature good, and they tend to also drift towards wanting to be in a space of happiness. Naturally, we all want to get into a space of being content or happy, even if we're going through tough stuff. So I think getting to see all these different cultures, especially in your youth, you get to appreciate that it doesn't matter which country you're from or what background or culture, there's a lot of good fundamentals in just being a human.
So who's been kind of an inspiration for you, a heroic force that's allowed you to evolve into who you are today?
I've always been gravitated towards masters, enlightened masters, and they're maybe the ultimate role model of what you can achieve as a human. And it's that's those role models they've gone beyond the sense of self. And I think much rather have role models that have kind of reached this pinnacle of human capability or capacity versus having role models that we're all like me. I'm limited in many different ways, so I'd rather not have role models of other limited folks when there are people who've reached the ultimate pinnacle, and then observing them, seeing how they are, seeing how they operate, and then seeing if you can yourself try and build some of these abilities of having control over your mind and your reactions and emotions so that you can have inner stability.
So if you can meet an entrepreneur alive today that's successful, that has integrity, that stands up for what you believe in, and spend some time with them, see how they work, that might help you on your journey, who would be that person?
Firstly, I think it's one thing I've learned, and I've been one of my last companies I was in was Apple, and I was in senior management in Apple, and Apple is one of those places where you have some of the greatest leaders and managers and technical experts that they all filter through a company like Apple, and so you get to observe a lot. And one of the things I eventually realized for myself is I've got to be authentic to myself. Everybody has interesting characteristics, and there might be things in leadership styles that I really like from certain people, and maybe things that I don't like in leadership styles from other people. So I can pick and choose by observing a lot of different people. What are the things that I want to inculcate into myself? But eventually, I realize that I have to become authentic to myself. uh, who I have to understand myself. Like, what are my natural tendencies? What are the ways that I think? What is my personality like? And all the good and bad and ugly that's in me, to come to terms with that and become okay with that, accept it, and not just accept it, but really own it. Like, this is who I am. All the good, bad, and ugly in me. This is who I am, and it's okay. I don't have to reject it. I don't have to feel like I'm lesser or not worthy or whatever else. And then now, if there's any leadership style, management style, or any other personality traits that I like in other people, I can see, is that actually relevant to who I am authentically? So first, cultivate the authenticity of being me, and then see if I want to adjust any of that, but not from a place uh, of feeling that I'm lesser or insufficient, but from a place of, oh, I'm already here. Now I want to evolve to the next phase. And how do I do that?
So when you look back on your career, you mentioned Apple. Kind of give me a snapshot of your career from the beginnings to now, some of the companies and the path that has led you to where you are now.
Yeah. So when I did electrical engineering in my undergrad, so I had a technical background. Thereafter, I had the chance to start a business with a friend of mine who was a college classmate, and it was one of those starting in a garage type stories, where we had no money, we just had an interesting idea and had a lot of enthusiasm and passion, and we built up this technology. Now you actually see it in a lot of cell phones, wireless charging. So it's the early forms of wireless charging. We developed some of that technology, and and worked through all kinds of crazy challenges and points where we thought it's probably not going to be possible to make this. We're trying to send power through the air, which is like fundamentally very, very tough. But eventually we were able to come up with nice technology, then started selling it, and then eventually the company was acquired by a Fortune 500 called Qualcomm out of San Diego.
Yeah.
So after the acquisition, I shifted to Qualcomm, was there for 3 years to help with the transition of the technology into their team. And then I had the chance to work at Apple, and this was in the iPhone manufacturing space, which is, there's probably no product in the world that's operating at the scale of iPhone. It's just mind blowing. Like the one, they have many factories in China, and the biggest one has 600,000 people in it,
Wow.
and it's like a city. When you go there, they've got movie theaters and shopping malls within the factory area.
Wow.
So it's just like mind blowing to see that kind of scale, and like how everything is just working, even dollar wise, people wise, resources wise, is just mind blowing. So it's quite fascinating to work at Apple, and then, like I mentioned, seeing such interesting leaders, such interesting technical experts that all flow through. It's kind of like a Grand Central Station, in New York, where all the trains come there, and then eventually they all flow out into different places.
Yeah.
So Apple is like that. And eventually I had the entrepreneurial bug again. And so I decided to go on a big journey to figure out what should I do next. And eventually a mentor of mine suggested, "Oh, have you ever thought of buying a business?" And I didn't think that that was a possibility for an individual. I thought only big companies do things like that. But eventually I did a big search, and I came across a company that was a vegan e-commerce business. It was distressed, and veganism is something I've been connected to for quite a while, mainly from the animal cruelty and the ethics point of view. And so eventually I acquired that business, and then spent 4 or 5. And I quit Apple and then acquired that business, and spent 4 or 5 years in very painful years in trying to turn that business around. It was a big challenge, uphill challenge, and eventually COVID ended up helping us, and and it changed a lot of how we operate and think. And that business grew. It was eventually acquired by a larger competitor of ours, and after that is when I had the chance to do what I'm doing now, which is I helped as a fractional COO, a part-time COO for small, medium-sized businesses where they'd plateaued. Their founders were burnt out. They were stuck. And so I would dive in and retool the businesses. And within 3, 4 months, they got back onto a growth of trajectory and grew 30, 40% within 3, 4 months. Because of that, I ended up having more engagements that I could handle. And that's when I started ScaleUpExec. So we're now a group of fractional COOs that go in and help a lot of small, medium-sized businesses unlock growth.
So the one thing about being a business owner, being an entrepreneur, is that there's an inherent risk in what you're doing. It allows you to grow and get to the next step. What's the biggest risk that you've taken in your career?
Typically, when I get into a business, I usually like to burn all my bridges. So there's no backup option. And I do that kind of on purpose. I don't know if that's relevant for everybody. It's probably not relevant for everybody. And it's also relevant at different stages of your life. But I would go all in, invest all of my money, invest all of my time, and only focus everything on that one thing. So I wouldn't have like a backup plan that, oh, okay, if this business doesn't work out, then I'll fall back into a corporate job, or I'll have enough savings built up that I can fall back into that. And so that just, for me personally, helped build a deep drive to make sure that it works and doesn't matter what difficulties I come across, because an entrepreneurial path, it's like one of those few journeys in life where there's nobody else who's telling you what to do or motivating you on what to do. You have to be self motivated, and for sure you're going to come across every entrepreneurial path is going to be way more difficult than you would have thought. You'll have way more challenges than you would have expected, and so you have to have a lot of inherent drive to be able to get through it and to work through all those times when you feel like, oh, maybe I should just quit, or maybe this is just not going to work out and I should just call it stop. I should just stop this and go down a different path. So yeah, being an entrepreneur, you just have to get through everything, and there's nobody else doing it except yourself. So you have to have that inner drive or motivation to help you get there. So that actually burning all my bridges or safety nets was one of the paths that I used.
So, speaking of that motivation and that drive, what gets you up every day to do this work that you do? To do it at a high level, to take care of your soul, your family, your spirituality. What is that drive for you every day?
Yeah, I think that's evolved over time. So at some points it was to make money. At some points it was to uh, because I had no backup plan. I just had to make it work because I had a family to support. But at this point now, where money is not as much of a driving force, and it's not necessary for me to work, now it's a bit more that you get to a point where you feel like you've learned some things that are valuable in life. And once you've learned those things, it's almost like inherent nature of a human that you do need to share it and help others in their journey. And if you can make a difference in somebody else's journey to lighten their load or to help them achieve their dreams or help them reach a sense of fulfillment, there's something really fascinating about that. And that itself is a driving force. And it's quite amazing just to see now at ScaleUpExec, we've saved so many businesses from that were on the verge of bankruptcy. We've saved a lot of jobs that otherwise would have been let go of. We've helped a lot of people achieve their dreams and reach a state of fulfillment. So I think that itself is quite fascinating to me as a driver.
So, if you were to sit down in a dream tonight with your 12-year-old self and have kind of a coffee table picture book and show that version of you where you've traveled geographically, career-wise, spiritually, personally, and just showed them what's happening in your life, would that version of you believe it?
Definitely not. I think, like I mentioned, when I was very early, I used to have very strong goals. I actually wrote for myself when I was early on. By my 40th birthday, I'll have achieved XYZ. By my 20th birthday, I'll have achieved XYZ. But like I had all these different goals and visions, and eventually, over time, I realized having a bunch of expectations in your mind is not necessarily what's best for the flow of life. And so at some point, I started actually removing all these expectations. With expectations, you can have ups when those get achieved, and then you can also have downs when those don't get achieved. And instead, it's better to have control over your reactions. That's like when you start having freedom in life, is when you have control over your reactions and you can choose how you want to be in any moment rather than be a product of expectations that you have in your mind. So I think my 12-year-old self, which had a different view of life, versus now my 40-year-old self, which has a different view of life. But it was totally okay. It was, I think, very needed for me at 12 years old to have these different goals and visions and whatever else, dreams. And the journey that ended up happening in life was just perfect as it needed to be to help me with my evolution. So I wouldn't firstly want to change anything of how I was when I was 12 years old or at any other time in life, because whatever things you go through are needed for your own evolution and growth.
The thing I love about interviewing folks is I love to get to the kind of the beginning and the origin point of how things work. And I'm going to set it up this way. having a jazz radio show, the Japanese culture absolutely reveres and adores jazz in a different way than any other country in the world. And I've always asked the question to any musician from Japan how that works. I am fascinated by India, the culture, the high driven level, the groundedness of everybody that's successful. There's a beauty to it. And there's never been anybody that I've interviewed that's had any kind of brush with the culture that hasn't been highly driven. Come from a family of lawyers or doctors or highly driven business owners. What is it about the culture from the beginnings have planted this seed of high success in all of the successive generations? How did that happen?
Mm. Firstly, I don't think it's across the board that everybody's driven in India. I
Okay.
think you might have talked with many migrants. Migrants are a bit different than people who have not migrated.
Okay.
And one of the reasons is when you migrated, uh, you're seeking something. That's why you choose to migrate.
Yeah.
And it's not that easy for just anybody to migrate. You have to have some kind of uh, setup in life, that allows you to migrate, whether that's financially or whether that's schooling wise or some kind of education or whether that's some kind of drive or passion that you have that you want to achieve that you may not be able to achieve in India. And so that I think you might have met, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm guessing you might have spoken with many different migrants. And so people who are migrants, they end up having, because they're seeking something, they
Yeah.
might have a much deeper drive. But beyond that, there is something that's there even in locals in India, and that is that there's this deep culture of spirituality. It's like the lifeblood of the country, and it's so embedded into like the stories that you hear as a kid. Like uh, in the Western world, the odysseys that you hear, or like the mythological stories that you hear when you're kids, they're more about love and romance, like the I'm forgetting some of the names, like Iliad, and some of these things. They're about romance and love and achievement. But in India, the stories you hear of as kids, they're about um, divinity and the expressions of divinity. And then now you even have, like, throughout the year, all the holidays and vacations are related to some aspect of divinity. And so it's just so instilled. Every corner you walk around in India, there's a temple. And the temple is meant to be an aspiration or a way for you to connect to what's inside of you. So it's like just a part of life of thinking beyond just yourself as a body, mind, ego, but to think of yourself as that there's a spark of divinity inside of you. And so that allows anything to be accomplishable. You can do anything because you have this unlimited capacity within you. You're not this limited capacity of body, mind, and thoughts,
I
but you're
love that.
actually something much beyond that. And so anything is actually possible. So there is this beautiful culture and very rich culture that survived all the invasions that have happened through the years. It survived all of the cultural changes that have happened through westernization, whatever else. So yeah, it's quite fascinating.
That's a great answer. That absolutely gets me to where I was hoping I would get with that answer. That's beautiful. So let me ask you this: of everything you've accomplished and more importantly evolved to in life at this point, what are you ultimately the happiest about that's happened in your life?
Uh, the happiest is, I think, I've firstly, I'm not judging life so much about happiness. I'm judging more in terms of contentment.
Yeah.
And to me, happiness means that there's probably going to be at some point sorrow after. But contentment is where there's no ups and downs. Where there's if you're going through a very difficult scenario, whether it's with people or whether it's with work or anything else, it doesn't bother you. Like, it doesn't impact you negatively. You don't have a reaction from it. So I think I haven't reached a state of being content 100% of the time, but I can feel that I'm going in that direction, and there's more control over reactions and what's happening inside of me. And so now my stability is getting not so much pitched on what's happening in the world around me, but more what's inside. And there's much more capability of getting to a point of permanent stability if you can pitch your happiness or contentment on inside world rather than outside world.
So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, clients, everyone that works with you, everyone that knows you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Uh, Interesting question. I think I'm a my perception of myself is I have maybe similar to what I mentioned before, a bunch of good, bad, and ugly in me, and that's okay. So I have things that I'm skilled in, things that I'm not skilled in. I have things that I'm able to behave in a way that I'm happy about. In other ways, there are things that I'm not able to behave in a way that I'm happy about. But that's okay. I have quirks in my personality. I have shyness in many different areas. I have lots of good, bad, and ugly in me, and that's okay. I'm okay with that. And it doesn't matter what other people's perception is. They may have a different view of who I am, and that's also okay. I'm totally okay with that.
So if anyone wants to learn more, reach out, any of the good business in your world, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, one place is on my LinkedIn, so you can look me up on LinkedIn. And I often post about my thoughts around management, leadership, entrepreneurship, and I also have on our website ScaleUpExec.com. There's a newsletter where I also post a lot about my thoughts and sometimes contrarian views. So people are welcome to sign up for that, and I just share a lot of insights that have helped me through the years.
Mr. Gupta, what a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. There's so much light, there's so much positivity, and we need so much of that in our world and the hope. So thank you so much for your story today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.